Big hair, shoulder pads. Remember 1988? Feels like a lifetime ago, right?
It does, doesn't it?
Well, this is the deep dive, and we're going back to that year to unpack a political scandal that really changed the game.
Oh, yeah. This one's got it all.
We're talking about the Gary Hart scandal.
The Donna Rice incident, yeah.
It really torpedoed his presidential dreams, didn't it?
It did, and I think it really ushered in a whole new playbook when it comes to campaigning, really changed the tone of things.
A lot more ruthless, wouldn't you
Yes,
say?
a lot more, yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to look at all the key players.
Yeah, we've got a charismatic, front runner.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a mysterious woman.
A fateful yacht trip.
Oh, and don't forget the political mastermind who might have been behind the whole thing.
I mean, it's like something out of a Hollywood movie, right?
Really, it is. It's fascinating how just this one event, it seemed to be a real turning point in how we think about politics.
In America specifically, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, before this, there was this sort of understanding,
An unspoken agreement almost.
yeah, about what was considered, fair game when it came to a politician's personal life. But after this, well,
All bets were off.
exactly.
So let's start by kind of setting the stage a little bit. Who was Gary Hart and why was he seen as such a strong contender in this election?
So Gary Hart was a senator from Colorado, a moderate reformer, and he had, well, a certain charisma about him,
Kind of a Kennedy-esque aura, some people have said.
Yeah, there was definitely that. He was seen as the Democratic Party's best hope to, get back in the White House after all those years of Republican rule.
Reagan.
Yeah, exactly. And Hart, he had this image as someone fresh, someone who could really connect with those younger voters, someone who could really, challenge the status quo.
But he also had, well, this reputation, didn't he? There was always a sort of, I don't know, a shadow hanging over him when it came to his personal life.
That's right. The rumors were always swirling around him, the whispers of affairs and womanizing. And Hart, well, he refused to engage with any of it.
Almost like he thought it was irrelevant. Maybe he thought his policies, his ideas were all that should matter. Or maybe he just really valued his privacy.
I think it was probably a mix of both, but you have to remember this was before the 24/7 news cycle, before social media. So maybe he just miscalculated how much the media landscape was changing.
It's like he didn't understand the rules of the game were changing. Or maybe he just refused to play.
Yeah, and you know what? That just made those rumors even louder,
They just kept getting more attention, didn't they?
Absolutely. The media, they could sense, vulnerability. They could smell a scandal brewing, so they just kept digging and digging and digging. And that's when Donna Rice enters the picture.
Donna Rice, the woman who would become, well, kind of tragically, linked to Gary Hart's downfall forever. So tell us about her. Who was she? How did she end up right smack in the middle of all this political drama?
So Donna Rice, she was a model and actress, part of that, really glamorous Miami social scene.
Yeah, she was young, attractive, and definitely ambitious.
And get this, they actually met at a New Year's Eve party in Aspen, hosted by, wait for it, Don Henley.
No, Don Henley. As in, like, Hotel California, Don Henley.
That's the one.
Wow. So what was she doing at a party with Don Henley?
Well, believe it or not, she was actually more interested in Henley than in Hart, at least at first. But, well, fate had other plans, I guess, She ended up spending some time with Hart, and, well, the rumors really started to fly then.
I bet they did. So here we have Gary Hart, this rising political star trying to keep his personal life private.
Right.
We have Donna Rice, this, young woman suddenly thrust into the spotlight. And then, boom, the monkey business incident. Tell us what happened. Paint us a picture.
Okay, so Hart and Rice, they end up on this yacht trip to the Bahamas.
Oh, this is good already.
Right, and the name of the boat. Are you ready for this?
I think so.
Monkey business.
Oh, come on. You can't make this stuff up.
I know, right? And of course, you know what happens. Someone takes a picture of Rice sitting on Hart's lap. The picture's grainy, a little out of focus, but it was all the media needed.
Oh, yeah. That photo became a national sensation overnight.
Oh, absolutely. It was everywhere. Magazines, newspapers, the whole 9 yards. It became, I don't know, the visual representation of the scandal everyone had been whispering about. And, it was a turning point for sure. But for the record, there are actually conflicting accounts of what really went down on that trip. Hart always said the photo was staged.
And Rice actually asked later on for those pictures to be destroyed.
She did. But the damage was done. I mean, that image, regardless of the context, regardless of whether it was true or not, it became the story.
The narrative had been set.
Right. And from there, well, the media frenzy just exploded. This wasn't just about rumors anymore. There was a photograph. And in our world, well, especially now, but even back then, visuals are so powerful, right? That photograph, it became the whole story. It became the truth. The media, they smelled blood in the water, and they went into overdrive.
I can only
It
imagine.
was like a feeding frenzy.
And so Gary Hart, the man who had tried so hard to keep his personal life private, well, he was suddenly the center of this very public, very messy scandal. How did he handle it? What did he do?
You know, he seemed almost bewildered, to be honest. Like, he was genuinely shocked by how intense the scrutiny had gotten, by how the story just, completely spiraled out of control. He tried to defend himself, of course.
But the court of public opinion had already, made their decisions.
Yeah, it was too late.
Yeah.
And that image, the narrative it created, it had already taken on a life of its own. It didn't matter what he said anymore.
So within days, Gary Hart, the man who had been the front runner for the Democratic nomination, well, he was forced to withdraw from the race. Just like that, his dreams, his ambitions, shattered by a single photograph.
It really was a stunning fall from grace. And, it left this huge void in the Democratic field. But you know what else it did?
What?
It created an opportunity for someone who understood how the game was played now, someone who wasn't afraid to play dirty.
And that someone was.
Lee Atwater. Now, Lee Atwater, he was something else. Brilliant political strategist, but man, he was ruthless.
A real force of nature, from what I've read. He was George H.W. Bush's campaign manager, right?
That's right, and he was absolutely determined to win. I mean, no matter the cost.
Atwater was known for that aggressive style of his, right? He seemed to, almost enjoy the fight. Taking down his opponents was a challenge he seemed to relish.
Absolutely. He was really the architect, you could say, of what we now call negative campaigning.
Right.
He understood the power of fear, how to tap into those anxieties people have and use them to his advantage.
So how did Atwater, this master of, well, let's call it what it is, political combat, fit into all of this with Gary Hart?
Well, the theory goes that Atwater saw how vulnerable Hart was, his absolute refusal to engage with all those rumors.
And he pounced.
You could say that. Some believe Atwater was the one who actually orchestrated that whole monkey business incident.
Wait, really?
There's this theory that he used Hart's friend, William Broadhurst, to basically set him up.
Wow. So you're saying Atwater might have been like the puppet master behind it all, pulling the strings?
That's the theory. The idea is that Atwater, working through Broadhurst, he encouraged the yacht trip, maybe even the visit to Hart's house in D.C.
Which, if you remember, is what led to that infamous stakeout by the Miami Herald.
Exactly. So it wasn't just this random encounter, it was a calculated trap. At least that's what some people believe.
And I think what makes this theory even more believable is that whole story about Atwater's alleged, deathbed confession.
Oh, right.
Raymond Strother, who worked on Hart's campaign, claimed that Atwater actually called him, apologized, and admitted to, quote-unquote, fixing Hart. If that's true, well, it's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it? It would mean that Hart's downfall, which, as we've been saying, really reshaped American politics. It was all engineered by his rival.
It's a controversial claim, of course, and we'll never really know for sure, will we?
I mean, Broadhurst, the alleged middleman, he's deceased, so we can't exactly get his side of the story.
Right. But the fact that the story persists, well, it says something, doesn't it? I mean, it really speaks to this whole, shadowy side of politics, this win-at-all-costs mentality that Atwater, that he really embodied.
Atwater was a really complicated figure, wasn't he? I mean, there are all these stories about his childhood, that horrible tragedy with his brother. It makes you wonder, did those events shape how he saw the world, how he approached politics?
I think it's tempting to try to connect those dots, to try to understand the why behind his actions. But it's hard, we have to be careful about trying to psychoanalyze someone from a distance.
Yeah, fair enough.
But what is undeniable is that Atwater was, a brilliant strategist. He understood how to use those primal fears that people have, how to exploit their anxieties to get ahead.
And he didn't shy away from playing dirty, did he? You mentioned the Southern strategy earlier.
Yeah.
Using that coded language to appeal to, let's just say it, racial prejudices without ever explicitly saying it.
Right. Atwater was a master at that. He knew exactly how to tap into those deep-seated fears and, resentments. And sadly, it's a strategy that's still alive and well today.
I know. It's disturbing how effective those tactics can be.
Yeah.
It just keeps happening. Politicians use fear and division as a way to grab power.
It's a tale as old as time. And Atwater was more than just a one-trick pony. He was really good at creating narratives, crafting those images that stick in people's minds, that really influence how they think about a candidate. I mean, think about the Willie Horton ad.
Oh, man. That was something else.
A truly devastatingly effective piece of political propaganda, that really played on racial fears.
And let's not forget, it helped George H.W. Bush defeat Michael Dukakis in '88. Dukakis, he was the Democratic nominee who ended up facing Bush, right? Remind me, what was his story? How did he get caught in Atwater's web?
Well, Dukakis was the governor of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Solid, policy-driven guy, but let's just say he wasn't exactly known for his charisma, you know what I mean?
I get it.
He represented, I don't know, this kind of old-school liberalism, belief in the power of government to do good. But up against Atwater, well, he seemed almost naive,
Out of his depth a little.
Yeah, totally unprepared for that level of, ruthlessness that Atwater brought to the game.
So how did Atwater target Dukakis? What did he do?
Well, he went after him on issues like crime and defense, tried to portray him as weak, out of touch with the average American. Remember that picture of Dukakis in the tank?
Oh, yeah. How can I forget that one? That's burned into my memory.
Right. He looked so awkward, like a fish out of water, trying to look tough and strong, but ending up looking, ridiculous.
Like a political cartoon come to life.
Exactly. And who do you think was behind that?
Atwater.
You got it. He knew how to create those lasting images, those, visual sound bites that just cut through all the noise, They bypassed any logic and went straight for people's gut reactions.
It's incredible, the power of a single image.
It really is. And then there was the Willie Horton ad. Man, that was something else.
Remind me about that. It's been a while. I remember the name Willie Horton, but the details are a little fuzzy.
Okay, so Dukakis, he supported this furlough program for prisoners in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Well, a man named William Horton, who they very deliberately called Willie in the ad, committed a horrible crime while he was out on furlough. Oh, right. And of course, the ad basically put all the blame on Dukakis. This was his fault. He was soft on crime, letting these dangerous criminals roam the streets. It was classic guilt by association.
It was pretty effective, too, wasn't it? I mean, it really tapped into people's fears.
It did. It was brilliant in a really cynical way. And here's the kicker. The ad wasn't even officially from the Bush campaign.
What do you mean?
They let a PAC run it.
Oh, smart. Plausible deniability.
Atwater was good at that, getting the message out there while keeping his hands, relatively clean.
The Willie Horton ad is considered one of the most effective, and also one of the most controversial political ads ever.
It is. And it's a reminder of how easy it is to manipulate people, how those basic fears can be weaponized, used against us.
So to recap, we have Gary Hart, brought down by a scandal that was maybe orchestrated by his opponents. And then we have Michael Dukakis, a decent guy, but not the most exciting candidate, who ends up demonized and ultimately defeated by, Atwater's mastery of fear and racial anxieties.
Yeah.
It's a pretty bleak picture of American politics, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's definitely a cautionary tale. It reminds us how susceptible we are to those, carefully crafted narratives, those images that bypass our logic and go straight for our gut.
We're emotional creatures, aren't we?
We are.
And what about Donna Rice? The woman at the center of all this. She basically vanished after the scandal broke. Can you imagine the pressure she was under?
It's hard to imagine what she went through. She became this symbol of, political scandal. But you know what? Years later, she came forward, spoke out about how she was portrayed, about the damage that was done to her.
Good for her.
I know, right? It was like she was taking back her story, refusing to be defined by that one moment in time.
It takes a lot of strength to do that.
It does.
So what about Lee Atwater? Did he ever, have any regrets about the way he did things?
Well, there is that story, about his deathbed apology. Apparently, he wrote letters to some of the people he felt he'd wronged, including Donna Rice. And he talked about realizing that maybe a little heart, a lot of brotherhood might be more important than winning, no matter the cost.
It's a powerful statement. But it also feels a little, too late. The damage was done.
Yeah, it's hard to know what to make of it, isn't it? But maybe, just maybe, it was genuine remorse.
I hope so.
Yeah. It does remind us, though, that even someone like Lee Atwater, this ruthless political operative, was still human.
Capable of change, of regret.
Exactly. But it also really underscores the lasting impact of these kinds of actions, how they can really shape our political landscape for, well, for years to come.
You know, it's amazing, isn't it, how this one election, this one scandal, it really casts such a long shadow over American politics.
I know, it's like we can just draw a straight line from the Hart scandal, from those tactics Atwater was using back then, right to where we are today.
It feels like it's everywhere you look these days, doesn't it? All those personal attacks, the truth and fiction, it's all blurred together, right? Everything feels so angry, all that outrage.
It's true. It's like politics has become a reality show. It's not even about the issues anymore. It's all about who can deliver the most shocking blow.
Yeah, and social media, it's just made it all so much worse, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's like we're all living in these echo chambers where we just see the same information over and over again, confirming everything we already believe.
It's exhausting. And I think it's made it so much harder to even have a conversation with someone who sees things differently, you know?
It's true.
It's like we've lost sight of what really matters, haven't we? The issues that really affect people's lives.
I agree. I think people are hungry for something different. They want to get back to the substance. They want a political discourse that's actually about finding solutions, not just scoring points.
I hope you're right. I really do. But how do we get there? How do we break free from all this negativity, all this division?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. We have to recognize those tactics when we see them, understand how our emotions are being manipulated.
Like seeing how the magician does the trick.
Yeah, exactly. Once you see those strings being pulled, well, it becomes a lot harder to fall for it.
It takes away their power.
It does. And we have to demand more from our leaders, hold them accountable, reward those who are actually trying to solve problems, who appeal to our better nature, not our worst instincts.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Gary Hart scandal and, Lee Atwater's legacy, what's the big takeaway here? What should we, as listeners, what should we take away from all of this?
I think it's a reminder that politics is powerful. It can do great things, but it can also cause great harm. And it's our responsibility, as citizens, to be aware, to be informed, to demand better. We can't just sit back and watch the show, We have to be active participants. We have to be the ones shaping the kind of political discourse we want to see.
And maybe, just maybe, by remembering these stories, remembering what happened to Gary Hart, to Donna Rice, to Lee Atwater, maybe that can help us find a different path.
I hope so. A path towards a more civil, more productive, more meaningful way of talking about, engaging with politics.
It's a goal worth striving for, that's for sure. Well, this has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the stories that shape our world.